welcome to the HGR Digital Asset podcast series, where we interview thought leaders in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Today, we're very excited to have Israel Keys. Israel Keys is the founder and CEO of a blockchain-based remittance company called BloomSolutions, and we're very excited to have him here today with us. How are you, Israel?
Well, thanks. Calling here from the Philippines.
Awesome. Yeah, Philippines is my home, and I think we've met several times there over the past few months. So my first question is, can you tell us a bit about your background, maybe some of your, I guess, your education, your past work experience, and then how you got involved in crypto, and then the transition into BloomSolutions?
Sure. I have a mixed background. Professionally, I've got a background in both engineering and also international humanitarian aid and development. In my early years as an engineer, I worked for a startup in Australia doing speech recognition and worked really on the low-level software there. Later, I worked in Mozambique, which is in the southern part of Africa, doing humanitarian work and across a wide variety of programs, I'd say, from HIV/AIDS, health and security, and mainly USAID funded. More recently, I founded two startups in the US. Can't say that they were successful, but that was an experience in itself. I've got a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and I'm really looking to try and meld both public good and business and technology in ways that would make an impact. I'm an Australian by citizenship, but I've spent most of the last 15 years abroad. I came to the Philippines for the Typhoon Haiyan response in 2013 as a relief worker here. And Philippines is an interesting place where you've got lots of problems here. Problems around finance and financial inclusion are just the start. I really got into the crypto business after coming to the Philippines. I think I actually had some student loans or fees to pay in the United States, and I used Bitcoin as a way to transfer some funds back to the US to pay some of those things off. But my curiosity really peaked around 2015 and looking at crypto and potentially its application for solving some problems here around financial inclusion and reaching the unbanked. And we started Bloom at the end of 2015. So Louise and I, we co-founded this company at the end of 2015, and we're really thinking around what could we do to service the needs of the broader unbanked in the Philippines.
That's perfect. I think you come in with a very interdisciplinary background. I think it's in the crypto world, it's always very useful to have an engineering background, and public policy is very relevant as well. It's very quantitative. I think a lot of folks in the crypto space, they want to really do something better for their community, and even I guess if you look at Vitalik, like his share of Ethereum shares or Ethereum tokens, it's actually not that much compared to the total network value. And
Right.
I think a lot of people in the crypto, they want to do good. At least the guys at this stage, not the Silk Road folks. But anyway, yeah. Anyways, can you tell us more about BloomSolutions and the problems that you're trying to solve? You touched upon this quickly on the, I guess, financial inclusion. So maybe you could elaborate more on that.
Sure. When I tell my friends overseas about what it's like starting a company in the Philippines, I often say that there's a lot of problems to solve. I think there's problems that are multi-layered, and when you look at the financial sector, there's a lot of different areas that could be tackled. So more broadly, we're looking at providing greater financial inclusion. About 70% of this country is unbanked, which means they don't have access to traditional financial services such as savings, lending, or even transferring money. Our first product at Bloom, which we called BloomRemit, was tackling the problem and tackles the problem of the cost of remittances. Now, this is money sent home by workers living abroad to their family. On average, a Filipino will send about $400 a month. It accounts for about 10% of this country's GDP. And in fees, a Filipino will typically pay between 6 and 12%, depending on the way they're transferring those funds. And as you can imagine, if they're sending $200 or $400, that's quite a lot for them. And generally, the people who are sending the least in the world are paying the most. So the problem we focused on was trying to reduce the costs of that transfer. The transfer of these small remittances that are sent home to support the family. Our approach has been slightly different to a lot of other fintech startups and Bitcoin startups in that we generally are creating solutions for the back end. So we're more of a B2B business rather than a B2C. And we're looking at kind of upgrading the financial sector in that way. And our first solution was a platform for money transfer operators around the world. Most of the Filipinos who have used us don't actually realize they are using us or even realize that they're using Bitcoin to send their money. They hand over money in the same way that they've done previously, over the counter in Hong Kong or in South Korea or in Singapore. And we've taken care of the back-end settlement for them, and then the disbursement here in the Philippines. So that's the general problem has really been around solving the broader problem of financial inclusion, and where we've started is really around remittances and the transfer of the funds back to the Philippines.
Got it. So you're trying to solve the problem of, or you're trying to use cryptocurrency as a payment rail, and I think that the market for that is pretty good. It's pretty big.
Right.
So the next question is, without revealing information that you're not comfortable sharing, do you have any specific short-term goals and some long-term goals that you'd like to achieve?
Yeah, sure. As a startup, there's a fair amount of experimentation still, so balancing both the short-term goals and our longer aspirations and even the opportunities becomes the trick. In the short term, in the next few months, we're planning on doing an ICO, and this has been something we've been working on over the last few months, and we'll be releasing a product later this year that will make crypto more accessible to the general public. Our approach still remains the same in that we'll be enabling other institutions and companies to do so, but really our eyes are set on doing an initial coin offering in the next couple of months.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, right? And I think that actually ties to the question, an interesting question that I'd like to ask. So obviously, if you've been keeping up with the news, there's been a lot of fire in the news regarding ICO regulations, AML, KYC processes, and financial surveillance in general. I guess in the US, it's quite a complicated landscape, especially for companies that require a money transmission license. For example, I think Coinbase, they recently, or a few years ago, they opted out of certain states like Wyoming because some of the money transfer requirements were unreasonable. Like they required, each money transmitter to be able to have the amount equivalent to how much they're transferring. And yeah, this space is quite complicated. I was wondering how is the landscape in the Philippines and in the countries that you operate? Are there any risks or any concerns or opportunities that you see in this space?
Sure. I think we're dealing with, I guess, broadly two sets of problems here, one in money transfer and then one around the growing regulation around ICOs. Since ICOs are globally or generally globally offered, we have to think about the US jurisdiction as well as jurisdictions within Southeast Asia and Europe. And yeah, to say it's complicated is the least thing. We're spending a lot on legal advice and legal counsel, not just to protect us, but I think once you're doing an ICO, it's analogous to making your company public in a way, and I think there's a responsibility to ensure that you disclose and communicate information to those people who are interested in your tokens. And then from the outset as an issuer, we're building in KYC and AML processes around the participation of our ICO to ensure, well, for one, that we don't become a vehicle for money laundering. So we find ourselves navigating this space with very little guidance legally. Certainly there's precedents around IPOs and other areas, but a lot of it is being created now, and we're trying to do this right. We're trying to do this as well as we can, and if that requires us spending a little bit more legally in order to do so, then so be it. But I think broadly we're trying to ensure that the general public, which may be participating in these offerings, are protected. And you can imagine in the Philippines, where people are low-income earners, their risk tolerance is a lot less. We don't want to be put in a position where we're offering them something that would cause undue or unnecessary impact on their financial situation. So there's a lot of things that we're thinking about, legal being one, but ensuring that we're doing this responsibly and cleanly is important for us.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you have a couple of key points that are really important. I think when you do an ICO, it's definitely quite analogous to an IPO with traditional equities. And you also talk about, or you hint at the Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as a payment rail could be the financial plumbing that will be more efficient than the systems that we currently have. So I was catching up on one of the articles that Caitlin Long was talking about, and she says that the financial system that we have is very inefficient and very complex. The example that she gave was when we buy stocks, we don't really own them, and when we deposit money in a bank, we don't really own that money either. What we own is a contractual obligation, an IOU for the underlying asset. And in the case of banking, right, we have a fractional reserve system, and with equities, at least in the U.S., a company called Seed and Company, they technically own 99% of all the publicly issued stock in the U.S. And I think these systems that we have are very outdated, and it's historically rooted in times when the settlement of securities was done by physically moving like paper, right? And almost as antiquated, and the system that we have still has some remnants of the system that's as old as maybe moving money through Wells Fargo stagecoaches. So it's quite ridiculous, and I think that what you guys are doing will definitely help make the financial plumbing more seamless and flow more smoothly, especially to populations in the Philippines, low-income countries that need them the most. So yeah, thank you for that. That's pretty awesome. So I guess one natural question is, as with any industry and any markets that you enter, there's always going to be industry incumbents. And I guess in the remittance market, we can say maybe Western Union is one of these guys. You hinted at the cost advantage of using cryptocurrency as a payment rail. Could you elaborate more on any strategies or any competitive advantages that you see can place you in a position of success relative to industry incumbents?
Sure. I think that there's a couple of things when I think about industry incumbents that come to mind. From a technologist perspective, I feel that the organizations, not just Western Union, but including the broader financial sector around banks, they're not really organized in order to create the innovations necessary. So their ability to adopt new technology, the processes that they have internally and the way that they're organized, I think is a inhibitor to be able to create something that is generally a large disruption. Dare I use the word in the industry? So I don't concern myself too much with that. But what I do think about is how do we continue to distinguish ourselves from the incumbents and not just distinguish ourselves from the price. Blockchain or Bitcoin technology has allowed us to come into a sector with very little capital, relatively speaking, and so the capital requirements that we've needed or required has been significantly less than what may have been required 20 years ago. And I think that's really the big advantage that it's been providing. We do provide cheaper remittances, but I would not argue or think it's wise to continually to compete just through price. In the Philippines, we've distinguished ourselves by being able to pay out anywhere in the Philippines. The banks are not connected here. The interbanking systems are faulty. And so by just creating an API which stitches together some of these different payment protocols and payment networks in the Philippines, we're able to just create value, and that's outside of the crypto space. Globally, I see the financial sector moving upstream, as it were. So there's increasing requirements and compliance requirements on banks, which force them to service higher net worth individuals and higher value customers. And so what I see kind of emerging of that is an underserved market where you not only have individuals that are not able to access banking facilities, but an underserved financial sector. And we see this in the money transfer operator business, where we find money transfer operators losing their bank accounts because banks are de-risking their portfolio and who their clients are. And these may be money transfer operators that have been operating the last 20 years, 30 years, and are fully compliant to regulation in their respective jurisdictions. But banks are looking at their portfolio and deeming them too risky. So I see the sector or the banking sector moving upstream and an opportunity in a growing underserved area of the non-banked financial sector. And so I really look at kind of the incumbents in that manner, that they'll move upstream, they'll optimize what they already have, but the real innovation, I think, is going to come from startups and new players in the area.
That's true. I think one of the reasons why Silicon Valley and companies that are innovative are able to sometimes displace industry incumbents is because industry incumbents have legacy systems that they don't want to change, and sometimes it's better to just start from scratch than to solve a problem that's already like too messed up. So
Right.
Excellent point there. Oh, one thing is I heard that Bloom was invited, and that you guys went through the Google Developers Launchpad Accelerator, right? Can you tell us more about this experience?
Sure. So we were part of Google's Launchpad program in the second half of last year, 2017. It's really a great program, and a program specifically designed and intended to help startups in emerging markets. One of the things that they said from the outset is we're going to introduce a lot of entrepreneurs and product managers and experts here from the Bay Area, but you guys are the ones who know what it's like in your markets. So take the advice with a grain of salt, but integrate it in kind of the problems that you're seeing in the markets that you're working with. So we're a part of that program along with, I think it was 30 other startups from around the world from different emerging markets. And it was great to meet other people, other entrepreneurs from other markets and exchange stories and learn from each other. And then just get exposure from experts in product development, user interface design, machine learning, and AI. It was a really great program. I mean, it was great for our team. I think we got a ton of advice from a ton of mentors, and sometimes that advice was conflicting, but it really got us as a team thinking about our business and where we want to take it.
Yeah, I think it seems like the Google program is like a treasure trove for knowledge, both in, well, I guess in terms of getting exposure to a lot of different ideas. I guess what's the most valuable piece of advice that maybe you've gotten from that program?
Cool. I don't think I've synthesized everything. More recently, we've had a leadership and management program with them in Singapore, and it's interesting to see how many startups just fail because of poor management and leadership. So less of a technical advice, but more of kind of soft skills. And with Google, and I believe it's called Project Oxygen, where they really look at what does it take to create high-performing teams. I love how they are looking at people in the same way. How do we build high-performing teams? And how do we do that specifically with Google Launchpad? How did we do that with early-stage startups? And I think Google goes in there without assumptions, but really tries to test what the data says and look at the data. And so a lot of my takeaways are around how do you build a high-performing team in a startup. I've led teams in larger organizations before, and what's different then when it comes to a startup? How do you think about attracting the best talent you can, despite the uncertainty of where you might be traveling? So my takeaways are more in the feedback and the realm of that area around leadership and management.
Got it. So the management example that you talked about just got me thinking of an example that recently came across. So I think the guys at like Listerine, they know that their product is like a lot better than all the other products, like whatever Colgate mouthwash and that other stuff. But they're always like very pissed when someone buys like a different product other than Listerine because they know scientifically the product is so much better. But I guess it's the point that I wanted to say is that it's important to have an interdisciplinary perspective, and maybe if the Listerine guys had like various perspectives from like marketing and communication folks, maybe they could relay that information to customers. Well, at least now I always buy Listerine instead of like those other products. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really key. It's not my top priority, ensuring that we can attract the best talent possible, not only here in the Philippines, but as we think more globally, and now with the ability to work remotely, the workplace really is borderless, and it's high on my agenda to be able to find the best talent that we can, attract them, and so we can get that diversity in thinking, and focus our attention on building something that really creates value and impact.
Exactly, and I guess if we were to find someone with that multidisciplinary perspective, you would be an excellent example. Engineering training, public policy training, experience in nonprofits, for profits, startups, Harvard grad. Like I feel like you'd be in a very great position to be a good leader and CEO. So the next round is like a quick lightning round. So ideally, it would be nice if you could keep your answers to like one word or like one sentence. So yeah, the first one is what makes you get out of the bed each morning?
Coffee. Other than that, my family and building the Bloom team. So going back to our last question, kind of what really excites me is building a company.
Got it. What's a skill that you are really proud of or really pride yourself in?
I'm a fast learner, I'd say. Other than that, my role is rather more generalist. So I'm not, and more around soft skills rather than necessarily technical skills. But I pride myself in being able to pick up a new discipline or a new area of learning fast.
Yeah, that's interesting. Coming from an engineer, so what's a contrarian view or a bold prediction that you have for the next 10 years?
Wow. Despite being in a decentralized technology and working around technologies that are decentralized, I hold the view that will become centralized again, or that people generally seek institutions and authorities to place their trust in. So I don't think we're going to be decentralized forever, but what is being disrupted is the broad trust landscape, and there are going to be new players that we place our trust in.
Yeah, I think that's a very insightful and thoughtful prediction. What do you like to read up to keep up with news?
This is probably a little contrarian as well. I actually take pride in not reading a lot of news. I think there's a lot of noise out there. So I try to separate the signal from the noise, and the way I do that is really relying on the team and the people around me to keep me up to date. So I rely on our team to be able to tell me when something's interesting or important that crosses the feed. But I generally don't actually read a lot of news streams in the morning or anything like that.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So you're outsourcing your diligence process. I like that. What's a hobby or activity that you like to do to de-stress?
I don't know if I have a lot of time for hobbies. I spend a lot of time with my family. I think that helps me take my mind off things. Wife and 2 children, and doing recreational activities with them allows me to kind of remain focused and keep my eye on what's important.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think a family and your support network is key, and I guess it's like pretty clear that you have a strong network in terms of your family and your BloomSolutions family. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, so Israel, that's all the questions that I have for you today. I'd like to thank you again so much for your time. Obviously, good luck on the ICO. And I guess, is there a way that you would like people, let's say if someone wanted to do more research on you and your company, is there let's say like a Twitter or a social media page or a website that they can reach out to?
Sure. Our main company website is bloom.solutions. That's BLOOM with the TLD of solutions. We'll be releasing an ICO website soon, but we'll announce that through the website. That's probably the best way. Yeah.
Got it. That sounds good. I'll be including your website as well in the description later on. So yeah,
Sure.
again, thank you so much, Israel. Really appreciate your time, and hope you have a good rest of the day in Manila.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate the time, and it's been good talking with you.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.